And now, can I welcome Kutucha to give her paper? Kutucha.
Hello. I was trying to use my mic, but it's not gonna work. So can you hear me well?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
amazing. I also prepared a PowerPoint just to help maybe to follow whatever I have to say, but I don't need to use it. So do you think it could be helpful and I can share my screen?
I think it's very helpful if you want to share your screen. Can you do that, Kutucha, easily?
Absolutely, yes. I am not able to share screen, so maybe I.
No, but you know the old phrase, power corrupts, PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. So let's just speak.
I don't mind, but
Yeah.
as our chair suggested to share, I am
Yeah.
just gonna try if that's possible.
Can you
Um,
screen? Yeah, I think if it's helpful to
but
use.
yeah, absolutely. I am more than happy to also share this PowerPoint by email and circulate and make it more accessible to everyone. Thank you, everyone, for this recent interaction. I'm sure that every time that we talk about decoloniality or radical changes in society, there is always like some the anti-decolonial goblins working for something not to work well. But jokes aside, thank you for organizing this conversation. Thank you for the invitation. Dilip, thank you for speaking before me. I think there are a few things that I would like to say that might maybe follow up what you said or repeat or come from a different perspective. Thank you, Pavan and Diran, who are coming after. And I think this panel is going to be amazing. Leslie for chairing, and Merced for organizing, and Anindia also for being here and organizing this. I am honored to be part of this conversation, and I also like to acknowledge what time we are talking about this, because we are talking in times in which Palestinians have been suffering genocide. Black people have been suffering a genocide, and as a Brazilian person, I cannot just not mention how the Quilombo communities are being suffering for hundreds of years, and indigenous communities as well. But I'm talking about the land snatching specifically of those Quilombo and indigenous communities. And I cannot not mention what is happening in Sudan, all my solidarity for the Sudanese people, and how many more of our people are going to have to suffer this kind of injustices for us to move more. So I think it's the topic of this conversation today, decoloniality now. It's what it needs to be. It's also part of the dream work that we need to be committed to, what we are doing for it tomorrow. So it is with the heavy heart of how our people are suffering, and with joy at the same time, to share this panel and the commitment for what we have, like, or what we envisioning for decoloniality in the future, that I'm here sharing the space with you all. So as you can see on my second slide, why decolonial and why now?
Katusa, I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you try sharing the slides 1 second? Would you mind sharing the slides 1 second?
It's in the chat.
There we go.
Yeah, it's coming now.
I think
yeah,
you
it's
can
visible.
see my
Yes.
screen now.
There we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, Katusa, it's working.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I can see, you can see that. You all right seeing my screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. So I always share my slides with especially Black artists. As the first slide is you can see, Bisa Butler works with different textures and different textiles. And this is what I had in mind when I'm talking to you all in this panel from different perspectives and from different frameworks of how decoloniality can be. So the reason why I use this is to say that decoloniality is not just one thing or one moment in history, but an ongoing negotiation that we need to be committed to. When we possibly get there, mãe, eu tô falando. When we possibly get there, we won't need to talk about decoloniality anymore or being in relation to the colonial anymore. So it's the disruption or the intentional disruption of this binary in relation to violence that I wanted to bring Bisa Butler to something that is new, that is different, and that is happening right now. And not in a permanent state necessarily as we wish, but showing that there are small spaces for us to get through sometimes, even if it's in just a moment in our days or in history. So why now? And decoloniality is not necessarily something new. And at the same time that we understand the decolonial movements that happened across Africa and Latin America in a particular time when we discussed the importance of decolonizing lands and having sovereignty over the land. I believe that it's still in those moments of struggle and fight, physical war, civil wars. We are still discussing this idea of truth and how this reality is built through language. And this language that is embedded and formulated through so many bad translations when colonizers arrived in different lands and didn't quite understand a few words, or how a few words were not gendered and yet imposed some understandings of patriarchal impositions of social order in different societies. And that language is still very present and is still building realities. So why not to disrupt some of these ideas that remain at the core of our doings? And in that doing, we can promote a different collective world making. And that is not to disrupt with the past or indigenous knowledge. What I'm trying to say is that as we move forward, the knowledge that have been ostracized can be brought together into something that is new, and it's a commitment to do something new. I am, at the same time that I bring some nostalgic ideas of my African ancestors, for example, and I am a passionate student of Afrocentric knowledge. I'm also talking about how we can reframe that into today's world making. I will talk more about that a little bit further on. So still, this language is embedded with hierarchical and speciesist understanding of the human. So who is the human, and how the human is imposing imposing a position of the center in relation to other species, in relation to the nature, in relation to the plants and the forest and everything that we are stepping on the face or on the grounds of Mama Gaia, Mother Earth. And that level of hierarchy is not just enabling this kind of truth to be told as the New World had been discovered, right? As if it is derivative of Europe. And also justifying the genocide, the epistemocide, and the appropriation of land that happened before. But when we say this and when we gather these ideas of discovery and try to challenge that, we disrupt as well the idea of humanity that we have, the idea in which other people had to be discovered in order to be civilized. We disrupt the idea that other people wouldn't have the possibility to be in a human condition if it wasn't for European or Eurocentric visions of science. And that science is what validates the possibility of being or not being human. These are terms that Fanon uses, the zone of being and the zone of non-being, that I think when we challenge colonial episteme, we can go back to and try to understand how this language is structuring a coloniality of power, as Quijano would say. Quijano, Mignolo, there are a few other authors that were already mentioned before. Maria Lugones, Ramon Gorosfogel. They are white Latin Americans or Caribbean. Ramon Gorosfogel is Boricua, is from Puerto Rico. They are white and they are very well established. And often when we talk about the colonial thought, we mentioned still white voices about the indigenous knowledge or the Afrocentric need to discuss those things. So I just wanted to recover this, and I don't want to say that I think they are brilliant scholars. I just think that still the centralized voice needs to be more. We need to open a little bit more the options, especially in terms of how we center Latin American and Caribbean voices. This is me. As a Brazilian, I'm just bringing this to the center of the conversation, as the citations can be political for us to understand those realities and also those power imbalances, right? Because many of these white scholars from Latin America are well-based and well-established in global North universities. So when we talk about the coloniality of being and the coloniality of power, the coloniality of truth and freedom, this is me taking from Sylvia Wynter's ideas. We try to dismantle the pieces of modernity or the pieces of coloniality. One of the pieces of coloniality is modernity. One of the pieces of coloniality is understanding the human as we see nowadays. One of the pieces of coloniality is capitalism. One of the pieces of coloniality is this idea of what is global or universal, because it comes from the Eurocentric perspective, just like it is in the introduction of one of Max Weber's work. How is it possible that everything that is happening here now in Europe can be universalized to the rest of the world? So this kind of questions in the sociological inquiry became very dangerous, not because it was an Eurocentric perspective, but because it tried to generalize or universalize that experience or that knowledge as everyone's knowledge or everyone's sense of humanity. And therefore, and that's why people who are not white, male, European, blue eyes become less than. I had the opportunity to go to the museum, the Anatomy Museum at the University of Edinburgh, where I'm based, where they have a collection of skulls. And the collection of skulls is, I don't know how to explain the sensation of walking into that kind of room, right? Because there are skulls brought from all over the world, and we don't know under which terms. But we know that there is colonial power involved. And we also know that some of those people are claiming the skulls of the ancestors back. But what we also know is that all those skulls were part of a collection of a professor, doctor, who were teaching in the university. we also know that he cataloged each skull. And in this cataloging, the A1 is the English skull. And then the A2 is the Scottish, and so on. So you can imagine that in that categorization of humanity, this idea to define who is the human and what is the human is very much embedded in this understanding of coloniality of power. So when I talk about the colonial difference that I bring from Mignolo and how those bodies were justified as that's commodity instead of being bodies, that created the sense of capitalism that we have nowadays, justifying selling people as objects in the name of development, justifying land snatching to this day, indigenous lands, to build soya plantations for the new vegans in the world. I am a vegan. I am just being very critical about the positionality. If we not have an anti-racist position in terms of the environment, we probably gonna fall into the same capitalist and racist dynamic. And I'm also worried about how coloniality maintains that system of exclusion against those who are racialized as non-white. This is a term that Sylvia Wynter and Charles Mills use, the non-whites, or yeah. So from an urgent call about the decolonial now, I would say that there is an importance to redefine the concept of the human. What is the human if it's something that goes beyond what the scientific norm has established for us, the biopower has established for us. So Sylvia Wynter says the division line of being human is one of the major empirical effects of which would be the rise of Europe and its construction of the world civilization on the one hand, and on the other, African enslavement, Latin American conquest, and Asian subjugation. So she's talking about the framework of the human. It is geographical, it is capitalist, it is based on a sense of knowledge. I am going to be very brief here, and we can talk about this later on because I don't want to take up more time. But my invitation in this conversation, coming from my Black feminists and decolonial studies engagement, is how we can frame our decolonial praxis, our own decolonial praxis. So knowing that the core of things is not necessarily in the capital or in the geographical aspects, but I believe it's the core idea of the human. How do we do that in our everyday as academics, as scholars, as researchers, as activists? So I choose only 3 aspects. In terms of collegiality, what kind of collaborations do you develop, and what kind of carefulness in the spaces you guarantee to your colleagues, especially those who are in a different power dynamic than you, whether they are in a higher power dynamic or a lower, because we know that in academia hierarchies is still predominant. So in terms of methodology, whether you are a researcher and do research, or in terms of the methods of your actions, how do you pose solidarity and hold space for creativity? The creativity that maybe we have to develop a new way of establishing things. So maybe we have to consider that all the processes that are set up in an institution are not really made for minoritized groups to be there. So therefore, we can't just ask colleagues to do a process that was put in place in the first place from coloniality of power. And how do we establish a dialogue in which you consider to learn something or disrupt those hierarchies and maybe help other junior scholars, even if it's not necessarily the path that you agree with. And in terms of knowledge production, do we have new fields of inquiry and to queer those inquiries in a way that it's not going to reproduce the binaries that separates white or black, human or unhuman? So how do we queer those possibilities of being in the world? And I'm talking specifically from Edinburgh and Scotland, where the gender critical, transphobic voices have been funded. So I'm not going to cite names, but they have been developed with a lot of strength. And this is something serious because this dehumanizes a group of trans people, for example. How have you been thinking otherwise and doing the dream work? Because there is no space for neutrality. And these priorities and these questions are, how are you prioritizing the decolonial in your everyday? Who are the individuals involved in the actions that you prioritize in your everyday? Are they from minoritized groups? Do you have anyone involved? Are you missing anyone? Recently, I heard a colleague saying, oh, we managed to hire in the last 3 years I'm in this role, 4 people of color in my department, and that's amazing. And me, as the only black person in the room, asked, how many black people? None. So I think, especially in the British context, I'm bringing my experience and also the context in which I'm in. There is an anti-black racism that needs to be discussed, that it's not the same as other racialized experiences. So how these positions of power are being reestablished in your community and how you're engaging with them. And how ethics of caring, like Patricia Collins invites us to think about, every time that you look at ethics of caring in her book, Black Feminist Thought, ethics of caring comes together with accountability. So how you're accountable for the ethics of caring. So you don't think that, I'm not trying to say that, oh, we all need to be careful and lovely. I'm trying to say that it's a challenge, and sometimes being accountable, it's the understanding and awareness that sometimes we're taking risks for that. What kind of risks can you take, or are you willing to take? And Soraya Nayak is in Manchester. She talks about hospitality as ethics, being there for your colleagues. I have a few more reflexive questions, and there is a quote from Zavala, Miguel Zavala, I love his work, about building community wherever you go, and what it means to build community, whether it is in your educative projects or research projects, as he mentions here. But I will just leave it there, and maybe these ideas of decoloniality and the practices of decoloniality can come in our conversations. Thank you very much, and I hope we can build something new together.
Thank you very much, Kutucha, indeed. Thank you very much. I'm going to give you my round of applause, and everybody else, which is also so very important. And actually, the whole reminding us about the ethics of care, which I think is actually fundamental to all relationships, and particularly in a university context, is something that's often missing and needs to be actually at the centre of what we do. So thank you for reminding us of that.